Call to order the Finance Committee meeting of the Keystone Central School Board of Directors, the September 25th meeting. And with that, I think we will look at first of all, let's do the hearing and visitors if we have anybody. I don't see anyone online. I don't think we have anybody. Is there anybody here that wants to make any comments? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the agenda. Only two items tonight, and first of all, I think the first item is just the audit planning communication, and that's from Baker Tilly. And I think it is on here as an attachment, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. It just basically outlines the process that they'll be starting here very soon. And they'll work through, and then that's what after they do the entire audit, they will then come up with, that's when they do the report. I believe it's in January. They come back and give us a full report as to the state of everything, and hopefully they won't have any findings, which they don't usually do. So, Joni, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that or not, or see if there's any questions or anybody has about it.
Yeah. Thank you. It would be nice in the future if they could just zoom in so we could all hear what they had to say, and we would appreciate updates. But it would be nice. And I had requested 3 times for Baker Tilly to come before the board, but it gets refused and it won't go on any agenda to learn about the SOC report, SOC 1 or 2. So again, I'm requesting that Baker Tilly be invited to a school board meeting, and they can explain the SOC 1 and 2 audit and give us an estimate. So we're all up to speed on that, whether or not we need it or not for the.
Well, I think after tonight's presentation, that will kind of drive whether there's a need for a SOC audit or not. I think once you hear what the tax office presentation contains, and I think you're going to see at that point, do we really want to make that investment or not, or whether we need to. So that's why I did not ask them to be here tonight. I think it's kind of putting the cart before the horse at this point. So.
Well, I will say this, at the Public Tax Committee meeting though, it was announced at those public meetings that they need to do a SOC audit, and it's going to cost about $50,000. So
who said that?
It was said at the Public Tax Committee meeting.
That the school district needs to do a SOC audit? I mean, who specifically said that?
At the tax committee meeting.
Well, I know that, but who at the tax committee meeting said that? I'm just asking.
I can talk about that if you'd like, or we can wait till we get to the next agenda item and address it.
Well, yeah, I think maybe that would make more sense. So unless there's any other questions about the handout here from Baker Tilly about the regular audit.
Is that an audit where they do the entire school and everything?
Yeah, that's the one that's the whole audit of that they do annually. They come in and they start about right now. I think they start in October, and they work very closely with the business office, and they look at pretty much everything. Joni, you can certainly add more than I can to it. So
in the pamphlet, there gives a timeline as to when they start the audit, and then the planning, they send us samples that we have to provide to them. And then at the end, if you remember in January, they come back and report the whole completion of the audit, how the school district looks, how the processes. Right. So that's typically in January, but right now they were actually here today doing their sample polling And they just ask, a lot of general questions. Again, key processes, key projects, and those types of things. And they're kind of in the sample stage, I'll say. And then October is when we file the annual financial report. So that is due the end of October, or it could be the end of November as well. But pretty much by mid-December, they're pretty much done. And so this report, that's actually on page 5, if you wanted to look at it, but that kind of outlines the develop audit plan, the perform audit procedures, and then they conclude the audit. And then this gives you the staff that is working on our audit. If you'd have any questions, feel free to call them. You can contact me if you have any, specific questions about the audit. I'll be happy to answer any of those.
I just didn't know if it was one big audit of everything or if it was targeting something specific. That's all I wanted.
So typically there's kind of 2 parts to that. They do a total audit out of
Right.
the whole school district, revenues, expenses, balance sheet accounts,
Right.
fixed assets. I mean, they cover everything. Then there's a single audit, and that's typically any federal funds. And
That's-
they will pick some, typically from the past, it's been title funds until we got the ESSER funds.
Right.
And they will go through and they will pick a majority of the samples. They'll pick any kind of payroll. They'll pick our expenditures. What did you buy supplies? They need to make sure that we are in compliance with how that grant was written. Did we purchase what we were supposed to? Did we follow procurement procedures? All of those things to make sure that, we're in line with how those federal funds, and it's called the CFA, which is an expenditure of
Right.
federal, awards.
I didn't know if we had to do a separate audit for every single one of them.
No,
That's
but
what I was wondering.
they do all funds. So it's not just a general fund. It's the activities fund, it's the athletic fund, it's the capital fund.
Right.
They cover all the funds, and it's always every year. We get audited every year.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else on that? Move on. All right, second item, as it says, is that his next presentation will be outlining the possible options available to the school district to ensure the district has the appropriate information as the tax collection committee deliberates reappointing the school district to collect the earned income tax or appointing a new earned income tax collector. So what I've asked Nick to do tonight is to go back and give us kind of a historical outline and background on how, we got to the place where we're at right now with the question about the earned income tax, and what mainly want to focus on what is going to be our options with the tax office and the collection process, depending on, what happens with the EIT decision with the tax collection committee when they make their ultimate decision. So I think he's going to be presenting some options to us tonight for how, we may want to proceed. And so I'm going to turn over, ask you to kind of hold off on questions, write them down until he's done so he can go through and we can discuss when he's finished.
Thank you. Sorry that I have to look straight up, but I just want to be sure that we're all on the same page as we discuss this. So as many of you know, the TCC has been discussing the possibility of what it would look like if the earned income tax was collected by somebody other than the school district. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the history there. I'm going to give the background into how it is, why it is today, but I'm going to abbreviate that just because some of you have heard this a couple times at length. At our TCC meeting, the first one, it was over 2 hours of discussing this, so I don't want to rehash all that with you guys. I'm certainly happy to answer questions that I need to, but I want to give you guys the background so you understand where we are and then what's relevant to the school district. There's not much you can do at this point till the TCC decides what they want to do. But depending on that decision, then there's a couple different paths that the school district can take. So the first slide is just the timeline, and I'm not going to go through everything on that, but I will start with Act 32 being passed in 2008. Within the state of Pennsylvania, there was almost 600 earned income tax collectors prior to 2008, and it was a mess. They did a study on how to fix that system. And what the study recommended and the law that was ultimately passed is the state was broken up into districts, largely along county lines, with some nuances for the larger counties and nuances for following school district or other taxing authority lines. When that happened, the law set up a separate government entity called the TCC, which is the Tax Collection Committee. And they are the ones that are in charge of the earned income tax collection within each of those districts. Within what's called the tax collection district, which again, mainly follows county lines. Probably their biggest job, they have a variety of jobs, but probably the largest job that they have is appointing who the earned income tax collector is for that district. Throughout the state, there's a variety of different earned income tax collectors. Some of those counties had 20, 30, 40, 50 different earned income tax collectors when the law passed, and they had to get together and decide who was going to be their earned income tax collector. Other counties had fewer, and it was easier for them to make that transition. At the inaugural meeting for the Clinton Tax Collection Committee, the board voted unanimously to appoint Keystone Central School District to collect the earned income tax for the Clinton Tax Collection District. Since Act 32 passed, a majority of the districts have gone to one of the major collectors. I think the number I have here is 55 of the 69 have either appointed Keystone Collection Groups, Berkheimer, or Capital Tax Bureau as their collector. And I think that number will go up by one on January 1st. I think it's Cameron County just appointed Keystone Collection Groups. And Lycoming County is currently in the process now of accepting bids for a new Act 32 collector. And I think by next month, they're going to make a decision on who to use for their earned income tax collection. I put in some other timeline here just based on some questions I've had from the board, questions that I've had at TCC meetings on sort of what preempted us to, again, look at who is the Act 32 collector, earned income tax collector for the district. And there's no one thing that causes us to look at that. Certainly the fact that 80% of the state does it a different way is one reason why we should say, okay, is the way we're doing it right? Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but we should certainly see what other options are. But there's some, I don't want to say issues because I don't want anybody thinking the way that we collect taxes is wrong today. I want to be very clear that the tax office does a very good job, but we have some limitations and there are some concerns for the future that have prompted us to say, okay, what are the ways that we can overcome those problems in the future or avoid those problems altogether? One of those options is a different collector, but those conversations are various throughout from the time I took office with certain financial concerns that were brought to me the minute I stepped in the door, through other concerns that we've had with software, with security, with auditing, with meeting with Baker Tilly, with meeting with the IT department. And then we had it that really ramps up on the next slide at the beginning of this year. At the beginning of this year, we had another turnover in our office, which I think makes in 2 years, 8 different people serving in 5 different positions over 2 years' time. We had another individual who said that they were moving out of state sometime next year. And then a planned separation from the district for myself within about a year's time. So at that point, I said, we need to have planning in place, a multi-year planning to be sure that the tax office is set up for success, whatever that looks like for the district, for the TCC, for the tax office for the future. Because one, there's a lot of turnover to handle when there's only 5 staff in the office. But 2, if we have these sort of concerns looming for the next future few years, we don't want new people to take over and then have to relearn all those concerns and relearn the ways that those can be solved. Anyways, we go through the whole timeline. The TCC, as I said, is the one responsible to decide who the Act 32 collector is. The entire TCC, so the leadership of the TCC knew about this ahead of time. The entire TCC and the school board was notified in July that this was an option being looked at. Everyone was invited to a TCC meeting in August, beginning of August. And that was about a 3-hour presentation. It wasn't a voting meeting. It was just a work session to say, here's the current collection process as we have it today. Here's what it would look like if one of these other major collectors collected the earned income tax for the district. After that meeting, the TCC chair took feedback, scheduled a special voting meeting, put an item on the agenda that she thought was best for the TCC, for the district, for the tax collection district. At that meeting, the TCC members indicated, certain members, I shouldn't say all of them, that they wanted more time to deliberate and discuss this. So the item was tabled. And now there are, I think it was just announced today, 2 work sessions in early October for the tax collection committee, not intending to vote on a new contract, but to work through some of the questions, make sure all the TCC members understand where we are, and for them to set a path forward that they think is appropriate for this. Now, almost all of that is TCC work, but what the TCC does can affect the school board. So that's really what I want to focus on today is the TCC. There's a lot of nuances and details to the decision they can make, but really it's 2 major ways that they can move forward. They can either not do anything or reappoint the school district, which would leave the school district as the collector for the earned income tax, or they could appoint someone else for the collector of the earned income tax. Both of them would have an implication on the school district because what in most counties are 3 distinct entities. You have your tax collector, you have your taxing jurisdictions, and you have your TCC. Here we have one part of that overlaps to a certain extent where the tax collector and the taxing jurisdiction, the school district, are one and the same. And then the TCC is separate. So it makes it a little unique here where there's a bigger effect on the school board and the school district because this decision that this entity makes over here on their own can affect this entity over here because they're also appointed as this third entity. So I want to go over those 2 major decisions that the TCC can make and then how that affects the school board and what decisions you guys would have to make either way. On the next slide, this really gives the 4 different options that I think the school board has. There's certainly nuances to every option. The first 2, you can see the title, if the TCC keeps the school district as the earned income tax collector. So if the TCC says, hey, we're not doing anything at all, we're not going to vote on this item, we're not going to have a voting meeting, we're just going to leave it as it is. Or they say, we want to vote to appoint a collector, but we're going to reappoint the school district. Then that would give the school district 2 options. The first one, really continue to operate as is, no changes. The office continues with 5 staff, the same software, the same physical location, the same operations, the same procedures. That's certainly a viable option. As I said, we're collecting taxes today. We're collecting the taxes that are due and we're distributing them as we've set up those collection arrangements. The second option would be to invest in changes to our local tax office, which as an administrator, and here's my opinion, I want to preface it with that, is necessary if the tax office is going to keep collecting taxes. I think it's certainly it's an appropriate decision for people to say, we want to have a local tax office with local employees. But if you feel that way and you want to be proud of your local collections, the tax office over the next few years is going to need certain resources and certain upgrades to be sure that those taxpayers are getting the services that they should get. And we're continuing to collect the taxes in a way that we should, that's competitive with others. So those are the first 2 options. We'll go into them a little more in depth. But the other 2, which again, it depends on which door the TCC opens, which option you get. But the second 2 is if the TCC appoints a different earned income tax collector. As I said, Act 32 in 2008 was passed specific to earned income tax because there were major issues with earned income tax. That law was later attempted to be expanded by Senator Brown, who was chair of the Appropriations Committee at the time. It did not pass to include all the other taxes. He wanted to take Act 32, which was only earned income tax, consolidate all the other taxes with it. And the Senate said, no, we don't want to do that. We're just going to leave it earned income tax. So as it is now, the TCC only has responsibility over earned income tax, period. There's other taxes that the tax office collects, though, as it currently stands. Earned income tax, local service tax, business privilege tax, and real estate taxes. Now, the real estate taxes that we collect are only for the school district. We only collect real estate taxes that are due and payable to the school district for school funds. The local service tax, the current tax office has collection agreements with all but 2 municipalities in the county to collect their local service tax as well. In fact, the portion of local service tax that we collect for the school district is much less than what we collect for the municipalities. There's a wide range of rates, municipality to municipality, as low as $10 per person per year, as high as $52 for local service tax. But in most jurisdictions, only $5 of that goes to the school district. So Lock Haven, for example, if you work in Lock Haven, you pay $52 per year in a local service tax. $5 of that goes to the school district. The rest goes to the city of Lock Haven. So the majority of our local service tax collection goes to the municipalities, not to the school district. Business privilege tax, the majority goes to the school district, but it also goes to 12 or 15 other municipalities. I'm not sure the number off the top of my head, but it's collected not only for the school district, but for other municipalities as well. And those are the four major taxes that we collect. So if the TCC appoints a new EIT collector, then that leaves the board to decide, okay, what do we do with these other taxes? And really, there's two viable options in my mind. There's a third option, but I would strongly advise against that, but I'll at least let you guys know what it is. I certainly don't want to keep anybody in the dark. The first is to continue collecting business privilege tax, local service tax, and real estate tax here in the school district while somebody else collects the earned income tax. And then the other option would be to that earned income tax collector that was appointed, have them also collect the business privilege and local service tax. And that's how it works in the majority of counties. Your Act 32 collector who's collecting the earned income tax collects a majority of local taxes that are levied within that taxing jurisdiction. Okay, so I sort of wanted to set that up to make it clear that if the TCC, chooses door one, there's option A and B that the school district then has to decide. If the TCC or opens door two, then there's really, two other options that the school district can decide. So if we go to the next slide, this is if the TCC keeps the earned income tax collection as it is. There's a lot of concerns, questions, material that goes into this decision for the TCC. But in my mind, the biggest thing is, do you prioritize a local office with local people, or do you prioritize a little more efficient collections at a much lower price? And there's reasons to decide either one of those. It's totally legitimate to fall on either of those sides. But to have that local collection, I really feel you need to invest in that local collection to be proud of those local tax collections, that local office, and those local people, which is the right side of this chart. But if we start with the left, that's continue operating as is. It costs the tax office about $580,000 to operate. That's directly from our most recent closed out fiscal year of what our expenses were to be able to collect all those taxes that we told you guys. So that's $580,000 per year. That is funded. The school district pays us to do that, and the municipalities pay us. And that's where our operating costs come from. So it costs us $580,000. A portion of that came from the school district paid us to collect those taxes, and the municipalities paid us another portion. If we continued that way, TCC says, nope, we're going to keep local EIT collections. And the school district says, we're not going to change anything. We like how it's operating today. That means we have a local tax office. The tax office is still here in the district with local employees. We retain 5 school district staff. And also you guys would get to hire 2 or 3 more staff. As I said, with that turnover, we have 1 vacancy currently. We have another planned vacancy, and then another one that is likely to come up next year based on a move. But there would still be some continued concerns from me as an administrator that I would be bringing to the school district. And that's concerns with software, concerns with security, concerns with auditing, concerns with turnover, concerns with the scope of work, and concerns with finances. And happy to address all those individually, but that's really why I feel that if the collections stay local, and it's fine to want that, we need to make certain investments into that office to be sure we're doing it the best way and the most secure way possible. If we make those investments that I'm suggesting, and I'll just quickly highlight a few of those investments, that annual cost would bump up to about $650,000 to $750,000 per year. The additional initial cost really depends on the scope of what you guys would want to change, but that could be anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000, with the majority of those costs coming in software, moving our physical space, which, could be some construction cost. It shouldn't be a lot if we're moving somewhere else in the school district, but could be some construction cost. And then the auditing, which I'll go through each of those in a little more detail. But if we do that, we still have a local tax office. We have 5 retained school district employees, 2 to 3 new employees that you guys would get to hire, but we would have better software, better security, better auditing, better physical space, better collection, and more importantly, better services available to the taxpayers. There'd be a steep training curve to that, but nothing that can't be overcome. If we're having new staff come in anyways, they're going to have a steep training curve no matter which way it is. But we will still have some limitations just based on our size. We are a county we are the second smallest county that collects our own earned income tax. These other collectors collect billions of dollars of earned income tax, which gives them certain things that we just can't have as a county of 10, 12, 14 million dollars of earned income tax. So really those costs, there's some smaller things in equipment that we need that we don't have, certain process changes, but the major ones are software. We really need software for not only a process portion of how we do our job, but also for security. And I don't want to get in that too in depth because honestly, I don't feel that's appropriate at a public meeting to start screaming what our, where our vulnerabilities are, but we really need new software. Again, earned income tax in 55 of the 69 counties is collected by one of 3 collectors. In the other counties, they pretty much use one of 2 softwares. The software that we're currently using now, or our only other option, because those bigger companies develop their own software because they have IT departments of 100 staff. So it's not like we can shop around for 100 different softwares. We really have 2 options, the one we have today or the one that's much safer, secure, better for our processes. But that software is very expensive. Auditing, we talked about that a little bit with the SOC audit, and I do have a quote that was provided from Baker Tilly 2 or 3 years ago that I'm happy to provide to the board. But it's hard for me to say whether we have a legal requirement or just a best business practice, but we at least have one of the 2, probably both. And the reason for that is when Act 32 was passed in 2008, they had a requirement that any appointed collector for a tax collection district undergo a certain audit that they had a name for. Well, auditors don't use that type of audit anymore. So technically every single tax collector is out of compliance because they're not having this audit done that the law says you have to do because it's no longer a type of audit that's done. But sort of what's replaced that is this SOC audit, systems and controls audit, which is very different from a financial statement audit, which is what we have now. Every year we're audited. So I don't want it to pretend like that somebody can be hiding money and we wouldn't know. That's not how our processes are set up. We still get audited by Baker Tilly every year, completely separate from the school district audit. We have to have those auditors come in specific to the tax office. But they've said that we need a SOC audit, and the law indicates that we need a SOC audit just because of the type of audit that's replaced this other audit that's required. But that audit is very intrusive. It takes a lot of time, but it's because it tests everything from your servers, your computers, your processes, your hiring, your firing, your access, all of those things to be sure that not only there's no vulnerability there, but there's no vulnerability that can be created. 2.5 years ago, before prices started spiking, without any extra costs for travel, for unanticipated expenses, other expenses that the auditors charge you for, it was $25,000 just to do the preparation for the audit, which means getting ready, making sure that you have the correct things being tracked so that the auditors can look at it, and then $50,000 per year to do the audit itself. I'm sure that cost has gone up since then. But that's the cost that it takes to do a SOC audit. Baker Tilly has a lot of information on SOC audits on their website, and they do trainings every once in a while as well that they invite people to that I invite you to sign up for. And then the physical space, as I said, we currently have some issues. Issues again is probably not the right word, but future concerns with where we are for a variety of reasons. Some of it's security, again, I'm not going to get into. Some of it's just not having a space to meet with taxpayers. It's kind of inappropriate to have a taxpayer. You're discussing confidential, sensitive tax information in a public lobby. That's really all we have right now. But also, I talked about some of the concerns I have with scope of work. We also are doing a lot of work for the school district as a tax office because we sit there as the people who greet anyone coming into the administration building, which has a whole variety of jobs that come along with it. But the main thing is that we have a tax office employee sitting there doing that work just because of the location that we're in. And it really means that we have no other way to make a secure place to meet with taxpayers where we can still have access to all the files and documents that we need, because we can't close off that area, because that's how everybody enters the administration wing of the school district. So again, just setting up the big picture. If the TCC says, we like the tax collection how it is, we're going to leave it as it is, or we want to reappoint the school district to show that we really like this local collection, then the board has, again, two options: leave it as it is, or invest in some of those in some of those procedures that would help us operate better. And then if we go to the next slide, and again, I'm not going to go too much into what the TCC does or how they do it, because that's not really the scope of you all. But if the TCC says, nope, we're going to appoint somebody different to collect the Act 32 earned income tax, then there's really, again, two options. One, the school district can say, we're keeping all the taxes that we can keep, or we want to outsource some of those taxes to the same collector who's collecting earned income tax. On the left side is if the district keeps the local service tax, business privilege tax, and real estate taxes. The estimated cost for that's about $450,000 per year, but a bigger portion of that is going to be bore by the school district as opposed to the municipalities. And I'll get into that in some of the charts I have later. But the reason for that is the majority of our funding from the municipalities currently is based on our earned income tax collection. If we kept these other taxes that are just school district taxes, we will be, the school district will be funding a majority of those collection costs. And a lot of those fixed costs that are expensive, the software, the auditing, will have to stay for these other collections with a lot less revenue, because the largest dollar amount of collections, the earned income tax, which is 12 or 14 million, compared to the local service and business privilege tax, who are combined 3 million, aren't there, but we still have some of those same overhead and fixed cost. To do that job, you would still need to retain one or two school district employees. You would still have a local tax office for all of your taxes except earned income tax. I can't anticipate what municipalities would do, but I would expect that most municipalities would contract with the earned income tax collector for the local service tax collection. They would no longer use us if that's the case. Pretty much for the only reason being that we charge 5%, they charge 1.75% to collect it. So it's much cheaper for them. And the local service tax is really much closer to earned income tax. They are really one and the same. They are both filed quarterly with the same deadlines, with the same businesses, with the same employees. So it's almost twice as much work for the collector and for the businesses if two different entities are collecting those taxes than if one are. But simply because it's so much cheaper, if there's already a different entity collecting the earned income tax, most of those municipalities would probably choose to go that way with their local service tax. And then I also already talked about the higher proportion of cost by the school district. And the real issue with this, which isn't an issue because it can be overcome with certain costs, is we would still have some of those software concerns. We would still have some of those security concerns, less building space concerns, because we would need less staff and less space if we're not doing the brunt of our work, which is earned income tax collection. But still some issues with scope of work and turnover and segregation of duties a little more important if we only have 2 people collecting taxes as opposed to 5. As I said, we're the second smallest county to collect our earned income tax. The only county smaller than us currently has a finding in their audit every year that they don't have an appropriate segregation of duties, because they just can't, because they don't have enough staff to segregate those duties that need to be segregated. And then the other option would be, and the option that I didn't put here that I wanted to make certain you guys knew of, is any of these collectors will also collect a real estate tax. I think it would be foolish to go down that path for a variety of reasons. One, it's more expensive for the school district because of our relationship with one of our local banks, First National Bank. We get a hefty part of our collection process done for free for us, where they get the mail, they open the mail, they process the mail, they deposit the checks. We get a report of all that just uploads right into our software. And that's at no charge because of the amount of money that the school district keeps with the bank. We would have to pay somebody else to do that. And the real estate tax is for a much shorter portion of time, and it's a totally different tax than the local service tax, the earned income tax, and even the business privilege tax. They're just wildly different from one another. And that's the majority of I shouldn't say the majority because we have so many earned income taxpayers and it's for the full year and every quarter. But when real estate taxes come out, that's when you have the elderly, that's when you have the Amish, that's when you have people that need to walk in, that need help with something, that it would still be more beneficial to have somebody here for that because they need that more than for the earned income tax. Because if somebody's filing earned income tax, they're already filing their state and federal, which they don't have a local office for. That's not true of real estate. They're accustomed to having a local person to talk to help them with their real estate. So not only is it more expensive, but you're getting less service. So that's why I wouldn't recommend using that collector for real estate, but they will do that if you so choose. So the other option that I laid out was appoint whoever the new earned income tax collector, again, if the TCC goes down that path, to also collect the local service tax and the business privilege tax. The approximate total cost of that is about $395,000 a year. You would still really need to retain one school district employee, one for the $40 million of real estate taxes that we collect, but also for a lot of the administrative duties and current duties that the tax office are doing for the school district side of the function. Together, that would create one job. And that person could still serve as a point of contact for taxpayer concerns and issues for any of the taxes, because it's still the school district's tax that you guys levy, that you guys passed into law, the earned income tax, local service tax, business privilege tax. But you wouldn't have a local tax office like you see it today. There would not be a local tax office with 5 employees sitting at the front if you go through this method. But we would overcome our software concerns, our security concerns, our segregation of duty and auditing concerns, and we'd have faster processing and more taxpayer services. But again, the big downfall there is you just don't have the local office. So those are really the 4 major options, but you're going to be forced into one of 2 or one of another 2, depending on how the TCC proceeds. There's really no set deadline for the TCC. As I said, they decided to table the item. And they said they wanted to deliberate and discuss more. So there's been 2 meetings set next Wednesday and the Wednesday after that at the Dunstown Fire Hall. And those are going to be simply for discussion for the TCC members to say, this is what we need to feel comfortable. This is what we need to understand. And then they can lay out the path forward. They may say, we're not doing anything. They may say, we want to vote in November. I can't tell you that, but because of it's something that could happen and that there's been some questions about, I want to be sure you guys are aware of all of those options. The next slide is just a chart, and that just outlines those 4 annual costs. I just wanted to put them side by side since we talked about them one at a time. Like I said, it's $580,000 a year is what it costs us to collect. That's what it cost us in our most recent year. That number is pretty set. If we made some of those upgrades that I've suggested in changing our building space, some new equipment, new software, new auditing, and the software and auditing really eats up the majority of that difference between 580 and 700,000. That's the cost. If we would, and this is everyone's cost, school district and municipality. This is not just school district cost. If a new collector were appointed only for EIT, but we would keep the LST, business privilege tax and real estate, it would cost about $450,000 a year. And then if a new collector was appointed for EIT, LST, and business privilege, it would be about $395,000 a year. The next chart is the one that's probably most important to you all as school board members and the finance committee. Why we're here today is those costs break down for the school district, because again, those total costs are the total cost to collect those taxes, but part of that's paid by the municipalities. So if we don't make a change at all, how it operates today is the municipalities pay us about $278,000 in whole to collect the taxes. And the school district, you guys pay us about $300,000 a year to collect all of the taxes that we collect. If we invest in those upgrades, how that split works based on the commission that we would charge, it would be about $335,000, $336,000 for the municipalities per year as a collective, as a whole, all the municipalities, and about $364,000 for the school district per year to invest in those upgrades to really make us one of the better local collectors in the state. The next one, if a new EIT collector is appointed, but the school district doesn't change their local service tax, business privilege tax, or real estate tax, you can see there's a huge difference in the municipality, but not too much in the school district cost. And that's, like I said, those fixed costs are going to stay. The school district's still going to have to afford software, auditing, all of these items, but the municipalities aren't going to be paying for that anymore because they're not, right now, the majority of the municipality money we get is through the earned income tax collection. The municipalities are now going to be paying whoever their earned income tax collector is for the majority of their collections at a much lower rate, which is why they see that drastic difference. Right now, they're paying 5% to the school district on everything that we collect. It would go down to about 1.5, 1.6% if it was with a different collector. And then the final option is if the school district would use, if a new EIT collector is appointed, the school district would use that for the other taxes as well. That would be about $276,000 a year for the school district and about $120,000 a year. It doesn't change too much because the municipalities are still paying that EIT, that other EIT collector. But that's the breakdown. And this is the dollar and cents portion. So before that, I wanted you guys to see the pros and cons of different collectors and the different options that are outside of dollars and cents, because certainly those are considerations. But this is just the dollars and cents side of those four options. So the next slide is the, oh,
Excuse me, please.
yes.
I'm sorry, I'm a little dense. I want to make sure. Am I understanding it correctly that with all, what is this, 4 scenarios here? The money coming in is going to be the same. It's just a matter of what it's going to cost us.
The tax money,
Yeah, that's.
yes,
what
it's the same taxes that are levied, no change in the tax
So the
law.
income is going to be the same and it's just what it's costing us to deal with.
Yes, and certainly a different
Okay.
collector could change the tax income for a variety of reasons. On one side, you could say, well, they're not local. They don't know our local businesses. They're not going to be able to collect as well. On the other side, you could say the fact that they send out notices every year, which we don't do because we're not required to, that they have easier online filing, that they have relationships with these major businesses, and they can do delinquent collections better, it's going to go up. So we can't predict the future if it'll go down or up. And I don't want to say it's definitely going to be this one or going to be this one. What we've seen since the implementation of Act 32 is those who have gone to larger collectors have seen increases in their collections, but that doesn't mean it'll happen for us. That's just historically how it's happened in other counties.
Thank you.
But yes, the tax revenue that comes in should be the same, with the exception that the money would get to you faster. Currently, all the EIT money that we collect for the school district, we give it to you once a month. The money that we collect for local service tax and business privilege tax, we give it to you once every 3 months. These other collectors give you money twice a week. All 3 of other collectors, they give you money twice a week. So you would have that money faster, and it'd be a little bigger because the commission wouldn't be as much, but it'd be the same tax revenue from the same taxpayers throughout the district. But the next slide is just the breakdown so you guys can see over 10 years, because this is a long-term decision. You don't want to flip-flop who your collector is every year. And like I said, there's benefits to prioritizing a local office. There's benefits to prioritizing a bigger collector. And on the dollar size, you need to see what that cost is of prioritizing a local office, and then what that cost is to going with a different collector. But that is just the cost to the district over 10 years based on those 4 different scenarios. And then the next slide, and we can quickly go through that. That's just the municipality's cost, but again, that's not really your guys' decision there. Also, the slide after that, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. I just wanted it there for you guys. This is what the TCC received from our tax office. They didn't have to receive anything because this is how we're collecting it today. Just side-by-side comparison with those other 3 major collectors that collect for 59 of the 60 or 55 of the 69 districts in
You
the
said you
state.
got phone bids for these, though. You called people up and you got phone bids. Is that correct?
We got term sheets from them to say,
But
yes, this is,
You called them on the phone to get these
yes, I
bids.
talked with each of these entities. And then my contact information's after that.
Nick, how many agencies handle this kind of tax collection in Pennsylvania?
There's
Are there
really,
tons of them or?
there's 3 agencies that collect for 59 of the 69 districts. In the other districts, it's either they collect for their own county, example here, example Lycoming, example Center County. That'll probably change in Lycoming County, or they set up a tax bureau which collects for a couple different counties. That would be like York Adams Tax Bureau currently does that. They collect for those 2 counties. So almost 80% of the state uses one of these 3 major collectors. The other states, either it's single individual county collectors or they combine to have a couple counties together. But no, if you were choosing a different collector, there's not that many options.
So you're saying the ones that are here were basically pretty much it as far as, who we would want to select from.
Who you want to select from, I would say yes. Certainly anybody can say, I'm going to start a tax bureau, I'm going to start a tax collection, but my recommendation would be for the safety and security of your collections is to either pick somebody who does this, who it works in the rest of the state for, or stick with what you have. I certainly wouldn't make up a new method or pick somebody in, Allegheny County that collects for only one county in the southwest portion of the state to try to do our collections. But yes, those are the 3 that it works for in 80% of the state. More than that, if you look at it dollars and cents wise, but about 80% if you just look at the districts.
Jeff, if I can add to that. He did not do a scope of work. He did not do a request for proposals.
don't have to.
A contract just showed up out of the blue.
There was
at
no
an August
contract.
TCC meeting. And at that meeting, the Clinton County Commissioner said the county will do it even cheaper than this contract. So they do have another option.
Is that true?
They were asked to give us a proposal after that TCC meeting, and they have not given us a proposal.
But they did say it during the meeting. So I just want to let you know that, okay?
Okay, well,
But again, that would be making up a new method as opposed to we have 2 good options here that work for our area or for the rest of the
Yes,
state.
it wasn't done through the public bid process.
But yes, and that's not required by law. It's professional services and it doesn't need to be publicly bid.
That's nice of you to say. Appreciate that.
is that true, David?
Question I have is if things stay in-house, if we continue to run it, who chooses whether or not to do the upgrades? Is that fully a Keystone Central decision, or do the municipalities get to weigh in on that? Because then we end up probably charging them more.
And that depends on how you want to handle that. If the school district decides to bear the cost of that, then the school district portion of the cost from those charts is going to be higher than what it is. I assume that the municipalities would pay for part of those upgrades, but that would require the TCC negotiating a new contract with the school district. Instead of saying 5%, they would have to renegotiate that to say, to fund these operations, we need this percent, and the TCC would have to approve that. The school district can't just charge the municipalities more without the TCC agreeing to that through a contract.
Do you
And that
really,
is, oh, sorry.
do you really want to assume something like that? Because you know the saying about assuming something.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't assume that, but
Okay.
but those are those would be the options for the school district to take the whole cost, or to say we want the municipalities to agree to this through a renegotiation of the collection agreement. And then if they would say no, then it'd be back to the school board to say, okay, do we want to fund these ourselves? Or then ask you guys could technically say, we don't have a tax office, find a new collector anyways. But you can't force them to choose somebody else.
Well, if I could build off of what you were saying, Roger, is that something the tax delegates did not know? They did not know that they have the power to negotiate a new contract with Keystone. So there are so many things floating out there right now that I appreciate all your opinions. I do, but there's too many things floating out there right now. So I'm glad the TCC delegates are postponing and taking a slowdown so they can regroup and decide what their next step is. So
Absolutely.
appreciate all your opinions though.
They're
Well, basically, so the way I'm understanding what you said is that there are going to be 2 more work sessions coming up for them to discuss different things and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
And then after that, then they can go in to make their decisions.
They
And
can
like
do
I
whatever
said,
they want. I
their-
mean, it's
Their decisions.
right. It's their decision, and they could decide to hold a voting meeting next week and vote on a contract. I don't have control over that. You don't have
Right.
control over that. The plan that, based on the feedback from that meeting and that the chair has set, is 2 work sessions intended just to get everybody on the same page and say, how do you want to proceed? I can't, they might not hold another meeting after that until their December reorganization meeting. They may hold a meeting the very next week and vote on a contract. I don't know. That's completely up to the TCC.
Well, I think regardless, they're going to make a decision here, hopefully fairly soon, as to what direction that they're going to go in. And once that decision is made, then it's up to us to look at, I would say, one of these options. And obviously, we would probably want to, I would think,
Appoint a new
As-
EIT, LST, and BPT collector.
well, that would make the most sense.
Yeah. it's
Because right
costing
now
the
we
district
have,
less.
right now we have the opportunity, because of the flux of movement of individuals in the tax office, to restructure things in a positive way from a financial standpoint. If, depending on what happens with the EIT decision, I think it would make sense to me, if they do appoint another collector, because right now we're it. I mean, basically they outsource their stuff to us, to our tax office. If they decide to go the other direction, I would think that if we wanted to have a chance to restructure things right now, now's the time to do it.
Well, it is interesting that 2 years ago, the cost to run the office was a lot less. And the board was never made aware of these technical issues. It's amazing to me that so much can change in 2 years. I'm not saying that it didn't change. I'm just saying, I don't see any verifiable numbers. I see ranges, I see opinions. I don't see any data. I don't see any spreadsheets. I don't see anything that we saw back when Susan Blesh was here. The same thing came up when she was here. And she gave us very detailed reports. I mean, down to the
I
pennies.
don't remember that.
Sure.
Yes, and at that time, 2 years ago, it was proven that it was more cost effective, if I remember correctly, that for what we had now, I'm not saying we can't build upon or look at other options, but this is not verifiable data to me. And
Elizabeth, do you have a copy of that report that
Oh.
Susan did 2 years ago? I can't find it.
no, I don't, but
Well,
it was very, very detailed. It was very helpful.
I've
I'm not-
asked her
And
for
I'm not
that.
saying, Nick, I'm not saying what you're presenting is not true. I'm not saying that, okay? But I'm just saying that these things weren't put out for a scope of work first, okay? And there's no RFP, request for proposals. And the tax committee didn't have that opportunity, and they didn't have an opportunity to negotiate with Keystone Collections here. So what I'm saying is, this is a good base and good opinions right now, but I'm really putting a lot of faith into the TCC delegates that they may want to maybe start the process over, get more details, financials, understand that, do we need rocket scientist software? Can the software they have now be upgraded? So what I'm saying is, there's just so many little pieces right now. And this
But
is
that-
packaged beautifully, but again,
but you talk about data, but you're telling us about a report that I don't remember. I never have seen it. You're giving us all of your opinion right now, but You don't have any data to back up anything what you're saying.
I
You
actually,
talk in generalities, but you want everybody to give you everything specifically in data, but you're doing the same thing. You're
Well,
talking in
verifiable
generality.
Figures, I'm
I
sorry,
mean,
data's the wrong.
I mean,
word.
I do have
Did you
data
have
and
something to say,
figures.
Jeff?
I was just going to say, I contacted Susan because you had mentioned about the report and she mentioned she didn't have a report. So I looked on her computer because I wanted to see that if that was, the case, then are we missing something here? We don't want to present data that isn't true or factual. And she had indicated that she didn't have that report.
Okay, well, she doesn't have it anymore, but I'm just saying there was more details when she was explaining it to the board members.
And
Okay.
I'm
And I'm
happy.
not
I mean,
saying-
I have more detail. I mean, I just didn't make up the numbers. I've calculated it out. I'm happy to provide that to you. I didn't want to inundate you with too much, but
Right.
I think to
But
go
this is
back
a
to
good
the
overview.
right
It's a
and to
good
go to
overview.
give you a little history on that change.
Mhm.
So it did not cost us different to operate 2 years ago. 3 years ago, it did because that was before the board agreed to give a considerable raise to the B secretaries. The B secretaries had may have even been $10,000 or more per year in a raise. $7,000 per year raise, which is 4 of our staff. That ate up a huge part of the budget. So that one vote was $28,000 extra per year, plus the benefits that are extra on top of that for our tax office. There were years before that we had some surplus, and the bylaws used to say that was then distributed back to everybody based on their collection. But there were still years, even before that raise, where we operated as a deficit long before I was here, and the school district was the one responsible for those costs. So the TCC voted to change the bylaws to say, if there's a surplus, we need to retain that because we're operating at a deficit many years. As I said, that sort of first day when there was financial concerns, within the first week of me being here, a check that the tax office issued bounced. And it was because we didn't have enough money. So it's been a concern for years. It's not something that's new. We've made it work, but what I'm saying is we've made it work in a way that we need upgrades to continue for 4, 5, 6 years in the future.
Okay, well, that's understandable because you can't be a functioning office without structuring in that you have to do upgrades every few years and invest some money. I mean, that's normal business.
Mhm.
But like I said, this is a wonderful overview and I appreciate all the time and effort you've put into this.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. I'm kind of like Bill. I'm a little thick. So,
I've got an excuse, I'm collaborating.
whatever. Okay, so basically, this cost breakdown that you
Yes.
provided, that one, the blue and,
Yep.
okay?
I try to save a couple dollars and go black and white, but yeah.
Okay, well, but what I'm looking at here is if we don't do anything, okay, it's gonna cost the district 301,000, almost
And that-
302,000.
That's what it cost in the most recent year that we closed out.
Okay,
Yep.
that's what it's gonna cost us. Okay, but with all the upgrades and everything, because of the software upgrades, because of the security that we're not gonna get into here, all those type of things, then we're looking at it'll go up to 364,000.
Yeah, I mean, the SOC audit alone was $50,000 a year. I'm sure it's more now.
Okay,
And then the software is around the same ballpark if both of those upgrades were made.
okay,
Nick.
but whenever it comes down to it, if we go with, or if the TCC goes with that last option, it's gonna save them a crap ton of money, and it's gonna save us a lot of money compared to what we're doing right now. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the dollars and cents of it. Yes,
That's the easy breakdown of it, correct?
correct.
Okay.
Jeff,
Yeah,
I got a couple questions for Nick.
Sure.
How long have we known the software was more or less inadequate, and why haven't we dealt with it before now?
I would say probably the cost. I can't say for history how long it's been an issue. When I was hired, I promised the board and everybody that was on the hiring committee that in my first year, I would not make any major changes. I didn't think that's appropriate for an office that collects 40-some million dollars for me to come in and say, I'm going to do all these wild changes. I'm in my second year now here. And that was one of the priorities, but I guess IT really told us, without getting too much into the security. It was a meeting. I think I might have even put the date here. "2023 Tax Office Administration discusses security and software concerns." There was a specific meeting where IT said, you need to change something. We went back to our software people at the time and said, you need to change something or else you risk losing us. They haven't been able to change anything in that time. So that timeline sort of run out for us to explore that option of our current software provider making the upgrades that we need for our IT department to be comfortable with it.
Okay, because I'm on your timeline right now. And I'm looking back. And it said in July of 24, there was a meeting with the board, or the board was notified about this stuff. When was that? Because I don't remember any of that.
I believe Christie, as the chairwoman for the TCC in her capacity there, sent out a notice via email plus a 2-page memo with it that said over the next 2 months, the TCC is going to consider EIT collections, what it looks like in the district, what it looks like with other individuals, laid out the dates of both meetings, the purposes of both meetings, and invited the board to those meetings as well. That was
I
in
remember
July.
Seeing them.
July
Yeah.
23rd.
Yeah,
I was going to say July 23rd is
Oh,
when I
so
I
that
remember
was-
seeing
That
them.
was the invitation to
Okay.
the meetings.
And
That
it
was-
discussed what we would be talking
Well,
about in those meetings
okay,
when
so
you read
yeah,
that memo.
that-
Yes.
that-
So you were notified in
Okay.
July, then in early August, there was a pure discussion for about 2.5 hours of all of this information with everybody that was in attendance there. And then based on that, the chair of the TCC decided to schedule a voting meeting then the next month after that. So that's that July, August, September timeline.
Okay. And then in the TCC meeting I attended, you had said it would be down at 1.62 and now it's at 1.75.
What would be down to 6.2? I'm
You
sorry.
said they would be collecting at a rate at 1.62 or something like that. And now it's 1.75.
This chart is from the same presentation that I gave in August and September. So there should be no change in those numbers.
Okay, 'cause I
The
remember-
175 that I mentioned earlier in this meeting was LST collections. If you look at that, the LST is a flat 175.
Okay,
The EIT rates are a little nuanced for a variety of reasons. Some give us a blended rate. We have a blended rate currently. That's why it looks like it's a 3.34% average. We charge the municipalities 5% to collect their earned income tax. We charge the school district 2.5%.
that's where it came in and you had said we collected 5%, they would collect 1.62 or something like that.
At the 5% that we charge the municipalities for earned income tax, Berkheimer agreed to do it for 175. Keystone Collection Groups agreed to do it for 195, but they offered the school district a lower rate at 125, which averages out because the school district's weight is twice as much because our rate's twice as high to 1.6, and capital tax offered 1.5%.
Okay. Something I was asked to ask you is a business privilege tax.
Yes.
Every business in the county is screaming about that. How much money does that bring in and how important is it? Because it's hurting businesses big time. I know of one farmer that called me and talked to me, and they said that the business privilege tax goes off your gross
Correct.
for the year. He said, okay, his gross is here. By the time he's done paying his workers, paying all his bills, paying everything accrued in the year, he had to pay on $600,000 of tax, but at the end of the year, he only made $28,000. And they're screaming And is there a way to eliminate the business privilege tax for our people in this county? How bad would that be? Because I know you can opt out of it.
Yeah, it's sort of beyond the scope of this conversation. I'm happy to answer if you're okay with that. Or I'm happy to have a private conversation as well, but it's about $2 million. How important that $2 million is really on you guys, not me. I mean, you're the
Right.
ones that have the budget every year, so I can't tell you how important it is. Yes, you can all, it's not a simple yes or no answer. The school board can repeal. You guys have enacted every tax that you collect, real estate, local service, earned income, business privilege, and you could repeal any of those taxes. The issue is municipalities also levy a business privilege tax. Right now, how that works is because there's a cap on it, both the school district and municipality levies it. And even though it's the same rate in both places, it's not charged twice, it's split half and half. So if we drop ours and say this person's in Lock Haven or Bald Eagle or Dunstable or any other place that levies a business privilege tax, if you guys repeal yours, but Lock Haven doesn't, then the Lock Haven businesses are still paying the exact same business privilege tax. Just all the money's going to Lock Haven and none of it's going to the school district. So yes and no is the answer to that question.
If we go to another place to do this, do we still have to collect that, or are they gonna do that also?
That's your option that you would get to decide.
Okay.
One of the benefits of choosing somebody else is I think that some of those businesses that are screaming unfairly look at it as a school district tax because they come to the school district and pay it to the school
Right.
district, as opposed to a local tax like the earned income real estate, because it really is being split between the school district and 11 or 12 municipalities. If somebody else is collecting it, then we're just one of those beneficiaries of a local tax enacted by many municipalities in the school district, as opposed to everybody viewing it as a school district only tax. But that's sort of beyond the scope of it. It could certainly be a
Right.
consideration.
The other factor we have to take in consideration as far as how we want to look at the tax office is we have to remember that the staff in that office is tied into our collective bargaining agreement,
Oh, big time.
which means, and that's my point, which means that every year as they receive increases, that has to be, it's not being paid for out of the general fund, it's being paid for out of what's being brought in these commissions. And what I'm looking at, those costs are going to continue to increase
Mhm.
if we maintain this staff of, 4 or 5 people. And I think we're probably pretty close to right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty soon we're going to be in the red as far as what we're bringing in and what
Right.
we're paying out. So that has to be a serious consideration whenever if the TCC decides to go and outsource this from not using us, but to use, say, Keystone or one of these.
Right, we're still gonna have to pay those employees.
Yeah,
No matter
Not
where,
necessarily,
and-
if we restructure the tax office in itself
But we,
and go to the option.
are you saying get rid of the union employees?
No, I'm
Well,
not saying
that's what I'm
that.
saying. We're still gonna have the
we're
employees,
still gonna
whether,
have their cost and their.
yeah, well, no
raises
matter
going
where
up.
they are.
Well, that's true, but we won't be paying for them with
Tax money.
with the tax dollars. I mean, you're still paying with the tax dollars, but you'd be paying for them out of the general
general
fund
fund.
like we pay
And
every
that's
other
not good
employee.
for us.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
we won't have to replace the ones that are planning on leaving either.
Right, we
So
would,
through attrition, we'll still be reducing
And
positions.
That's true, Tracy.
How
That's
it
true.
how it can work, and I can't say this is how it will work because you have no idea what's going to happen with staff and openings and everything. But as of right now, we have 5 staff. One is vacant, one is for sure leaving, one is probably leaving. That leaves 2. If there's one position left that's necessary for the real estate administration, I would assume, but again, it's hard to assume these things, but one of those 2 would be a perfect fit for that. We have another vacancy that's a lateral transfer in this building, in this hallway coming up in December. that would be the last one. So as you said, through attrition, it's one employee moving. If this would all happen, and there's just so many ifs here. That's why I don't even want to say this is what's going to happen, because that's not fair to anybody. But that's one way that this could work, where through attrition, there's only one new employee on the general fund, which really should be there anyways, because we're doing school district work that shouldn't be funded through municipality commissions, but is currently.
So in effect, we wouldn't be replacing what, 2 or 3 positions?
It would be 4 that wouldn't be replaced, only 1, right? 3 through attrition, 1
Right.
through a transfer into a position that's already there.
But
Oh.
based,
That's quite a bit of savings there.
If, so one thing I've never seen is, a scope of work or something that shows, these are the things that we can change to make the office more efficient and to make the process better. Now, when you're talking about this software and a lot of manual labor, it would be nice, whether it's you or the next tax officer, to see that list on if there was an upgrade to a certain software, how would that make the office more efficient? And what I mean by that, all the manual things that go into things that can be non-manual.
Right.
Why don't we ever see, it would be nice to see that
Sure.
report.
Yeah, and I'm happy to provide that. And I can
Yes.
give you a brief overview right now.
No,
The-
I'm saying a real
Okay.
report. That would be
Yeah,
nice.
sure. Absolutely.
With costs and savings
Yep.
and,
Yeah, there's not too much savings is the issue, because there's more revenue, which is a good part, because a lot of it is those delinquent collections that we currently just don't have the manpower and we don't have the software to go after. New software would help that. So there'd be more revenue, but not less employees, because we still have all the other,
well,
the
I
paper
understand that.
filings that we get.
Mhm.
There are software options to scan that in and manually read it.
Yes, and
And that's
also,
what all the major companies do, but that's almost $1 million investment, which is one of those limitations we have as a smaller community.
well, there might be options out there.
Okay,
Maybe
but-
the county's already doing it. I
Right.
don't know. But I'm just saying, a more balanced report
Mhm.
to show more balanced options,
Okay,
I think would be
can I,
helpful.
can I
Yes,
ask something
go,
now?
please.
Okay, so yes, that would be all nice and great and everything. But isn't it true that this is actually in the TCC's hands as to what happens as far as
Just that one
going
tax.
with these different things, or?
Correct. The earned income tax
that
collector
one
is
tax.
completely the TCC. I would tell you that if the TCC says we want to keep it as it is, I would absolutely sit down with the board. I would even suggest that some sort of work committee is established to say, let's walk through what upgrades we need and what those costs are, and then leave it in your hands to decide, do you want to try to renegotiate a contract? What upgrades do you want to prioritize? How do you want to do that, to be sure that somebody with that knowledge and experience can give that to you so that you can look forward for the next few years and plan for that. But we certainly don't want to go through all that work if the TCC says there's no reason to go through that, because we just want this cheaper to collector to do it. So I think
It just
that,
seems to be more balanced, that part should have been part of the scope of work.
Mhm.
All of those things,
Mhm.
not grave details where you're beating yourself up over every penny, but I'm saying that's why a scope of work is so important. And
Mhm.
I'm so disappointed that whole step was missed. Whether or not you have to do it, it's so everybody understands this and it's a balanced report.
yeah, and
To me, this is not balanced. To me, this is like you're going out of your way, and I'm sorry, this is my opinion.
that's okay.
It just, boom, all of a sudden, August. Here's the contract, folks.
let
Come to
me
September and
remind
sign
you,
it.
let me
So-
remind you of the purpose here. The purpose of talking about this.
I'm just explaining about
is-
the balanced.
Yeah, but what the purpose of this, everybody's always saying on the board, as we should, let's find ways that we can save money for the district.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, Chris, you're always
Absolutely.
saying that. So this is a way to do it. Now, it kind of bothers me that you're insinuating here that Nick is coming up with some willy-nilly figures here because he doesn't have everything listed in a spreadsheet for you. And That's, and you're entitled to your
sorry.
opinion, but that's,
I'm sorry. you
And
feel that
I'm
way,
in
Jeff,
my
but that's not-
opinion-
Wasn't my intent. It
well,
wasn't.
it sure sounds
wasn't.
like it.
Well, I'm
so-
sorry.
My,
Retract.
Okay.
one of the questions I got is, and I was surprised, I'll be honest with you. I didn't know anything was going on until I got asked to come to that meeting. The last TCC meeting was that we knew nothing about all this going on. And it was like, wow, when did this happen? But then I found out that there's a vote that goes out from all of us board members that we hadn't discussed. We didn't know anything about it, but our votes were going to be counted. Can you explain how that?
Yes, we have a, in February 8th, 2004, the school board on resolution 144.
I think 2024, correct?
Yeah, 2024, thank you.
Yep.
The school board appointed, I want to make
The
sure.
tax officers, yes.
The voting
Yes.
delegate is Christy
Yeah.
Serafini Brooks.
Yeah.
The fiscal operations, and the alternate is Joni McIntyre.
Right.
And they never came to us with any updates, though. It's unfortunate. And they are our voice. They are our voice. They're not independent of us.
Right.
They are our voice.
I mean, certainly if you wanted more time, I could see that, but they did notify you in July and then invited you to a meeting in August to discuss it before a vote was even scheduled in September then.
But while this was all going on, we were never, whenever this first got initiated, not that this is the
Mhm.
correct time to talk about this, okay?
No, it's
But I'm
not.
just letting you know that a delegate's responsibility is to inform their municipality or their entity at all times. That's what they do. They go back, they inform them, and then the entity, whether it's the school board or the municipality, then helps them, gives them direction. They come back and they act on behalf of their entity. They
Okay.
don't act independently.
I was trying to figure this out and learn it. 'Cause
Mhm.
I didn't know when,
Well, no, it's, yeah.
in February, when we had our first meeting, weren't sure of it.
Mhm.
I'm all for doing what we can to save money. I've harped that since day one and still will. And if this is the better deal, it's the
Well-
better deal. I'm all for it.
We just gotta hope the TCC goes along with it.
Right.
And how that vote works now, to be clear about it, which is something the TCC wants to explore changing possibly before they vote on this, is every person who collects earned income tax, every political subdivision that levies an earned income tax is allowed to appoint one delegate. That's how Act 32 is set up, and that's how it has to operate. So every municipality that has an earned income tax is supposed to appoint a delegate. There's a few that don't, no matter how much we ask them to. And then the school district appoints a delegate. They're the ones who comprise that government body of the TCC. The TCC, DCED released guidelines, which are consistent with Act 32, that says it's based on a weighted vote based on your portion of population and total collections. Now, you can change that if you wish to, but the school district continues, well, the Clinton TCC continues to operate in that way. That's the way their bylaws are set up. That's the way that they unanimously passed their bylaws, which means that the school district, as a single school district, which is uncommon. Most districts have multiple school districts and multiple municipalities. The Clinton TCD has one school district, and it's Keystone Central because of the geographic size of the district, which means that we have 58% of the vote. Now, I can tell you, Lock Haven has 11% of the vote. They want this to happen. We have 58% of the vote, but we want to be respectful of what the other municipalities think. And we also want to be sure the school board understands what's going on, which is why it was voted almost unanimously, not quite, to table this item. But that may change. But I'm also not sure that that would benefit the school district. Right now, we have 58% of the vote and we pay half the commission of every municipality. If we lower our vote, I don't think we'll continue to benefit from half the commission rate.
Okay.
But again, that's totally a TCC decision, their operations, how they have it set up. I just want you guys to understand how it sets up, because your delegate does have a lot of power based on the structure of it.
But whatever we do, we pretty much want to make sure this is a long-term ordeal, because you don't want to be switching it every couple
No.
of years.
Well, a contract is usually for 3 years. And if they decide the contract isn't working for them, then they have to renegotiate if they can, or they have to find a new one. And that's something I brought up at one of your meetings.
Mhm.
If they find 5 years from now, 6 years from now, maybe the contractor's gonna raise their price. Like here, they haven't raised it in 12 years to the municipalities. But if their third-party contractor decides to raise rates for whatever reason, it's an unknown. They can get out of the contract,
Right.
but then they're gonna have to go ahead and shop again.
Yep.
Or renegotiate. So they're gonna be adding another layer of maintenance onto themselves, but that's okay. Just as long as everyone's on board with that. But if I could go back to the weighted vote, please. That was one thing I was very upset to learn, and then all the delegates were very upset to learn, is none of the delegates, except for the Keystone employees, knew about the weighted vote.
Right.
Is
And
that
that
our,
has caused-
is that our
But-
concern though?
yeah.
If they
Well-
don't realize what their own rules are?
They get that vote every year. It's required to be given to them annually when it's recalculated.
Yes,
So they
ma'am.
do get that vote every
May I
year.
please finish? They were very angry and a lot of trust was lost. And I feel very confident that TCC delegates will do whatever's best for them, but I will say this, I don't appreciate that board didn't know about this weighted vote. Our delegates didn't tell us. You didn't tell us.
What's the point? Whether you
point
know or you
is
don't know. I mean,
that-
that has nothing to do with us. That's all TCC business. I mean, so we know we got 58% of the vote.
Well, I'm just
So
saying.
like Nick
it's-
said, that is to our.
I don't
would be
support
our
it.
Benefit.
I don't support it, and I feel bad for the delegates that they had to learn it in September after all this time, and that the delegates never told us. You never told us, and they were blindsided by it, and I don't feel that that is a good thing
Is
to
that
do
true,
to our
Christie?
community.
Were they blindsided at that meeting by, that, did nobody knew what that was? Is that true?
Like Nick said, the weighted vote is annually given out to the TCC members. So even if you don't attend the meeting, it is distributed just like the agenda is. So it's emailed every year. And then when the bylaws, if we're going to change the bylaws are sent to you to show you what's happening, what's current. And then if there's going to be a change, that's also said that we're looking at changing the bylaws.
Yes,
So it's all done through an email. And then in our meeting, that's when it's voted on.
well, I was there,
So
Christie was there,
basically,
excuse me. I
no,
was
excuse
speaking.
me. So basically what I'm hearing, and I just want to make sure that this is completely understood. At the beginning of the year, everybody at the TCC knows exactly what's going on. Is that correct?
They should, yes.
Okay, and if they don't, then that's, they're
That's
on
on
them,
them.
correct?
I distributed. I can't make anybody read it.
That's
They
kind of
don't
like trying to
read it,
get
it's their
people into
problem.
these different,
And
Okay.
the bylaws that set this system up were approved by 20 some of the municipalities were at that meeting that unanimously approved this weighted vote method.
okay, so that has, you know what? I'm glad you feel bad for those people. But guess what? That's
Their
not our
fault.
problem.
It's their
That's
fault.
their problem.
I
So
understand that, but at the
that's-
meeting, it was very, very obvious on how the delegates felt.
Then they didn't do their homework. And that's what it boils down to. You get in information, and whether they are upset or not, that is their fault because they failed to read the information and be aware of what's going on. And I'm
Okay.
betting that most of the time, the majority of the people, these delegates don't even show up to the meetings.
Yes, and there's a reason. It's usually in the middle of the day. But that's another story.
That's, again,
Again,
that is
that's
not our
problem.
concern.
Exactly, but just so Jeff understands.
I understand.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. Yes, Nick, I just want to be sure I understand something here. I'm looking at your total annual cost breakdown chart. And you have invest in local tax office upgrades. In other words, we keep it and get all the stuff you say we need, right?
Yeah,
Am I
yes.
understanding it correctly? Yeah. And you say, now you had mentioned that it was going to be, I don't trust my memory here. We were gonna have to invest $650,000 to $750,000 if to make these upgrades? Did I misunderstand? you
The
with
six
that?
hundred and fifty to 750 is the annual cost to operate after the upgrades are done.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's about a 70 to
Okay.
$120,000 per year
So
increase.
if you add these two, the 336 and it's a year up, okay, I
Right.
understand now. Okay.
And that's simply because the audit as of 2 or 3 years ago is a brand new cost that would be at that time $50,000 per year, plus expenses for the auditors, probably closer to 70,000 with the inflation and the cost that they bill that, plus the software, which is probably around 50,000. There's some other minor costs in there, but those are the two big ones that we really need. That would be the majority of that increase in cost.
Okay, thank you.
But there was a separate number, which isn't included in that breakdown between municipality and school of the initial cost. And the big part of that is one software conversion is crazy expensive. It's ridiculous how expensive it is.
Oh, yeah.
But it
I'm
takes
sorry, I
hundreds of
looked it up.
hours to convert that.
350 to 500,000.
Right.
Said for that.
It-
Now, is that factored into this number here or that on top of this roughly $700,000 that you've got in your graph? Is we gonna have to come up with another somehow 350 to $500,000?
Yes, so this graph doesn't cover those initial costs. This is just the annual operating cost, but that 10-year does include that initial upgrade, which is why that second row is a little
All
higher.
right, thank you.
So
You're
there's
welcome.
that
And then,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Lindsay, are there any legal pratfalls we should know about? Thank you.
Do you recommend, though, that if the TCC considers it to start over and just get a scope of work and an RFP? Given the fact that the Clinton County now is probably a player?
I can't tell the TCC what to do. They're an independent entity from the school board. 1, 2, RFPs are only required for Commonwealth agencies.
Sure.
We're not a Commonwealth agency, so it's not required. And it's professional work. It's different requirements for that
Sure.
type of process. What the way Nick has gone about it is completely consistent with Pennsylvania law.
But would there be a benefit or anything for the TCC to discuss that?
That's up to it's not
This-
appropriate for me to opine as to what they
Okay,
should or
okay, I
shouldn't
just didn't
do. It's
know
not a
if-
legal
We're-
issue. That's
So
up to
that's
them.
still an option for them.
We are getting
Still, okay.
away from the agenda here.
you're
We're
right,
not
you're right.
talking TCC. That's totally removed from what we're talking about here. So, go ahead, Tracy.
So should the TCC vote to keep everything here? There's a lot of security concerns then that we need to discuss in an exec session probably.
No.
So, and that's going to be a major factor.
Oh,
on what we
absolutely.
do and spending the money and just saying that, I'm just worried about that.
Yeah, we have a list. You're absolutely right. There's a list that has to be talked out in detail, depending on what TCC delegates decide to do in the next few months or next year or.
Yeah, and even if they decide not to do anything, we should then have that conversation because if it's only 6 months to a year of having to deal with that, that's very different than having at least a year and a half. Because how that collection works is if the TCC would say, we want a new EIT collector starting in 2025, we're still responsible for collecting the 2024 taxes, which are due April 15th, 2025. The extension date's October 15th, 2025. So the tax office still has to operate for a period of time. So if they say, hey, we're not ready to make a decision by January 1, 2025, if we make a decision at all, then we would be looking out until October 2026 if they would make a decision, which means then we have to look as a district, okay, how do we want to prioritize some of these upgrades and decide if we can invest long-term into this.
So
Which-
it's,
Going off of what Tracy just said, does the school district have to pay for that security or do the municipalities pay a chunk of it also?
Right now, it would be on the school district because we're pretty much operating on the income we get. So if there's any more expenses, we can't change the collection agreement. And as a school district office, the school district would have to pay those expenses.
Okay.
But we can renegotiate with the TCC and say, listen, we need these upgrades. It's going to cost X amount of money to do that. We're going to have to raise the interest rate or the commission rate to X dollars that we
Right.
charge you to collect.
Okay.
And all of
Which-
that is given to the TCC committee to tell the municipalities that that's a possibility?
Correct.
If
And
they
this-
stay in the house, things could be raised because of security and software issues.
Correct.
Would that security system be only used by the tax office, or is that a security system that would also be used outside of the tax office?
Well, I guess I should say the software cost is the biggest cost. And when we talk about security, we're talking about the security of our software, which holds confidential taxpayer information.
So it
The
only be used
software-
by, so it's
Correct.
only used by TCC or the tax office, and that same software would not be used at all in any other building?
No, there's no software currently unless we custom build our own that is for school district functions and earned income tax.
And that's an
collection
but that's an
function.
option.
It is. It's
And
Okay.
if
So that's
we,
the- don't have.
if we outsource
we don't-
everything but the
We
real
don't want
estate
anything
tax,
to do with that, because if we have anything that goes on
I don't
and
know.
create that software so that it can be used for both district and if something happens,
If there's a leak, we're in
we
trouble.
are in big.
Yeah, it may
I don't
actually
know enough
not
about
be
it.
an
I
option.
don't.
I don't know. It's part of the SOC audit is part of that
I mean,
security, which
there's a
would,
huge
Mhm,
breach in social security numbers
It-
here
Mhm.
and all
Nick.
that stuff.
mhm.
if we have, if we went to that one scenario where everything but the real estate tax is collected by the other agency, and we're just doing real estate here, what impact would that have on the software need?
there wouldn't be a need. We can either stick with the same software we have only for real estate because real estate information is not confidential. If any of that got out, we would lose a couple dollars in what we charge people for. Well, we don't charge the homeowners, but the closing companies when they need a tax certification to tell them if the taxes are paid or not. But there would be no confidential information that was shared if there was any kind of breach. But there are other options that are available for just real estate tax collectors because there's tons of those throughout the municipality or throughout the state, throughout the Commonwealth. So we could tell our software provider, hey, we're sticking with you because we don't care if any of that information gets out. But if you're not going to give us a good enough rate, we have these 100 other options for real estate only.
So
But
what
those
I-
other softwares only do real estate.
So what I hear you saying would be financially very beneficial from a software expense standpoint. If we were to, you send everything out except for the real estate.
And that's why that third chart,
Right.
the school district's portion was so high because if the TCC says we want a different EIT collector, the school district says we want to still use ourselves for local service business privilege and real estate tax. Well, then the software cost is almost the same. We're just missing a couple $100,000 of commission revenue because we're no longer getting it from the E EIT.
Nick, do you recommend that the board work with our IT department? And I mean, I appreciate your opinions, okay? But IT and software, that's a real specialty thing. And I'm not saying you're not, aware of all these things,
Mhm.
but it would be interesting to hear from our IT department or probably our auditor, maybe both, I don't know, what exactly they recommend, what would be the best choice if we go that route. Initial costs, things like that, not to
Well,
take
I-
away from
no,
your
I-
expertise.
I would
but-
say-
Maybe we ought to wait until the
I-
decision is made
No, I
before
know,
we do
you're
any
right.
of that.
You're
I think
absolutely correct. I'm just
if
saying
we-
that's something else that's out there.
Right, what Roger said is absolutely correct. If we can't really move forward with any of this stuff until the TCC really gives, makes a decision on their direction. Once that happens, then if they're going to maintain things here as they are, if they're going to outsource the EIT to another agency, then we can have those further discussions.
Right, well, because right
Well,
now,
certainly-
they're under the understanding that they're gonna have to buy all this software. So we'll just take that number off the estimate then.
I mean, it's up to you guys, obviously, if you want to talk to the IT, but I have talked to IT because you're right, it is specialty. I'm not making software decisions without them. I don't know what's secure and not secure. And they have laid out a path. I put the meeting that we met with IT.
Sure.
At that meeting, we set out a path that said, this is what we need our software to do. This is the deadline we're going to give you to do it. They didn't meet that deadline, which is why we're here. So it's been to IT. If you want them to reiterate that to you, that's totally fine. I'd suggest executive session because of some of the
Absolutely.
security issues, but it's already gone through IT, whether I do it or the superintendent does it or you guys do it. IT has already vetted this and told us your options are get them to upgrade by this time or shopped for new software.
Well, that's the second part is the part that we don't have an answer to.
I mean, there's
That
only
what-
one other
what that-
software.
What IT would recommend or the auditor recommends, that software, what it would cost, software options, I don't
That
know.
point, at
But
this
that all
point, that point
depends.
is moot.
All-
If the TCC decides to do something else. So why should we even worry about it? Do not worry about that right now. If
Yeah.
it comes back that we need to do it, then yeah, we'll worry about it.
Well, all right, I
We-
misunderstood. I
we cross the
misunderstood.
bridge
This
when we
is
get
only
to it.
about earned income tax. There's still those 4 other taxes, correct?
3 other. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're right,
correct.
correct. Now, those 3 taxes, 2 of them have very delicate information.
Yes.
So we're still going to be having those 2 of the 3. Okay?
Unless TCC decides to go.
No, those are our taxes. They have
Yeah,
nothing
you
to
would-
do with
No,
those taxes.
we wouldn't necessarily have to do that. If we decided to outsource the other 2 that have the sensitive information and we just keep the real estate here, then we wouldn't need to necessarily upgrade software.
Yeah,
The
we went with that
software
fourth
is
option.
Right. The software is a consideration either way, mainly because of the cost of it if you try to keep part of those collections. But I think it's appropriate to say, okay, what do we need to explore with those software options? Because if you're talking about exploring EIT software options, there's one other choice, unless you're going to spend $1 million to have Tyler Technologies build you a custom software, which nobody can afford that. Unless you have an IT department of 100 people, like a few of the bigger collectors. But it's a very different, you have one other option if EIT is a part of it, because there's so few EIT collectors. There's 12 of them in the entire state. If we're talking about real estate tax and then even a little bit business privilege, a little bit local service, our software options change a little bit because they're more widely
Mhm.
collected.
Okay, well, the county has software, and that's something we'll explore at the right time, because maybe the county's software is more adequate, has better service, and we would need a software package. Okay, interesting. Lots of options.
Anything else? It is after 8:00.
I would
I'm
just
for
like to
that.
say my phone number and email address are on that last page. Please, as you have questions, contact me. I'm happy to. And I invited everybody when you first started, but I know you didn't know too much then. I'd love for you to come into my office, sit down, understand what we do, what we collect. We're always happy to do that with the board.
All right,
Very brave man.
all right.
Thank you.
I
All right.
entertain
you.
a motion to adjourn. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
Second and all that other stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, David and Joni and everybody else that was here tonight. Appreciate it.